I am redesigning my layout, and I have taken some inspiration from a rather unlikely source, the west coast of Canada, and specifically the Pacific Central Station in Vancouver, BC. Let's get started. So in my last video, I went over all the different challenges that I was having with my layout, some of the mechanical problems, as well as some design problems. And one of the mistakes I made when I was designing this layout was trying to fit too much into too small a space. I compressed a variety of geographical locations into a shelf, and that ultimately turned out to be a cramped, poorly functioning layout. Specifically, I tried to compress Toronto's Union Station to fit in an 8-foot area. And ultimately, that was a bad idea. So I'm adamant on my new layout that I'm still going to have a representation of Toronto's Union Station, but it won't be an exact replica of what you find in downtown Toronto. The biggest challenge with the station is it is a through station, meaning that trains arrive and depart both eastbound and westbound through the station. This is a compromise because a stub-end station means that passenger equipment arrives and backs out of the station before re-entering the main line. But because I'm more interested in running trains over staging trains, this seems to be a decent compromise. So I decided to start researching stub-end stations. There's a lot of great examples throughout North America, specifically in Washington, D.C., New Jersey, and Philadelphia. And in a lot of examples, what I was really excited to see was old station buildings at the end of the station yard. The configuration of the station on this old layout is that the station tracks, the platform, runs parallel to the wall, and the back of the station runs alongside the passenger platform. In many of the stub-end examples that I saw, the station building is at the end. So for me, that means there's an opportunity to turn the station so you can see the front of it versus the back of it. So while I'm researching different stations, Via Rail Canada posts drone footage on their Instagram account of the Pacific Central Station in Vancouver, BC. And my initial reaction was this station could be a perfect stand-in for Toronto Union Station. The Pacific Central opened in 1919 as a terminus for the Canadian Northern Railway, and today it has two principal functions. It is the western endpoint for Via Rail's cross-country service, the Canadian, as well as Amtrak's Cascade routes between Seattle and Portland. Again, the station is stub-end, meaning the tracks terminate at the station and trains must back out. Adjacent to the station is a Via Rail maintenance yard, where tracks are serviced and maintained. So these features made the Central Pacific a reasonable stand-in for Toronto's Union Station. And as I explored the area using Google Maps, I discovered that there was bi-level passenger equipment parked there as part of the West Coast Express. I was totally unfamiliar with the West Coast Express, so I did a little more digging to discover. The West Coast Express is a commuter rail service that runs between Mission, BC and downtown Vancouver. And because I could see that there were Bombardier bi-level cars parked in the maintenance yard, I felt like it was a reasonable leap to assume that perhaps those could represent GO Transit passenger equipment. What I didn't realize is as I did a little more digging, I discovered that when the West Coast Express opened in the mid-90s, it originally either purchased or leased equipment from GO Transit, meaning that there's a further similarity between this station and Toronto's Union Station. It's a major terminus for the Via Rail Canadian, as well as GO Transit equipment has seen its platforms. So I thought it'd be an interesting challenge to see how much of this prototype railroad I could fit into a space the length of my layout shelf. So using Google Maps, I measured the length of the entire yard from the end of the passenger platforms to the yard throat. And it turns out the entire area measures around 3,100 feet, which translates to 19 feet in end scale, meaning that in theory, I could compress the entire yard and fit it on my layout shelf. So I've done my best to convert the prototype into a reasonable track plan that you could build with Pico number 8 switches and Pico Flex Track. The process I used to do that was to measure certain segments of track on Google Maps and then transcribe those into track segments using a program called SCARM. Going back and forth between the map and track planning software, I came up with a fairly reasonable facsimile of the actual prototype. The proposed layout design that I've come up with measures roughly 20 feet long and 2.5 feet deep. Now that's slightly bigger than the space I have at hand, but really this wasn't an exercise to see if I could specifically fit the Pacific Central into my layout room. It was more simply a challenge to say, could I do it? In the track plan, you can see that I've attempted to add the key buildings on the layout, as well as the different roadways and some basic topography. I'm really surprised at how well the layout fits on a shelf. I didn't expect this station and yard area to either be as small or as big as it turned out to be. So as I reimagined my union-based layout, I'm starting to seriously consider that I can take the Pacific Central track plan that I've developed, make it fit the space more appropriately, and rebrand it as downtown Toronto. Now, a significant challenge in doing that is that the Pacific Central is basically on a flat area. It looks to be surrounded by some industrial parks, and there's a SkyTrain south of the station. So if I wanted to reimagine this as representing downtown Toronto, I would need to elevate a city scene behind it. Union Station itself is in some places 15 to 20 feet lower than the actual city level. So there's a possibility I could take the track plan for the Pacific Central, I could make it 20% shorter, and figure out a way to build a city up behind it. And I would love to have a stand-in for Union Station that was somewhat plausible and allowed me to feature prototype-inspired track work so that operationally the layout does adhere to a prototype. So there are two key features that are missing from this design. So first of all, the end of the yard just terminates. If you wanted to translate this into an operational track plan, you would at least need to extend the east side of the plan so that it either went into a stub-end yard or carried on into some continuous loop. And with that, the layout doesn't have any option for continuous running. One of the things that I do want to design into my new layout is a double-track mainline with continuous running. And at the time of this video, I'm thinking that I could take the east and west ends of my layout baseboard and translate that into a folded dogmo. I could perhaps fit in the Pacific Central Station. I'm not sure what I would do with the other end, but right now I'm excited about the idea. Now, I'll reiterate, this is a work in progress. I've enjoyed looking at a bunch of different prototype railroads, and I'm frankly excited about the way that this design has turned out and how it might have an opportunity to work as a stand-in for what I'm looking for. I don't want to get too bogged down on being prototypically accurate, as I do want to have some playfulness to this layout. I want to continue to add the idea of urban decay, and I definitely want to feature an abundance of urban structures. And so while I try to pursue those features, this design checks a lot of boxes for things that I've been trying to resolve. And if you're interested in Canadian railways, I encourage you to check out the Pacific Central Station, as well as the West Coast Express. As someone who's located near Toronto, Ontario, it's fascinating to see how other railroads operate on the other side of the country. Let me know what you think. Thank you for stopping by, and I'll see you next time.